Have you ever felt the ground beneath your feet crumble without warning? I remember that Tuesday like it was yesterday, a day that began just like any other. Work emails piled up, Jason's schoolwork lingered unfinished on the kitchen counter, and the steady hum of the coffee maker was a background melody that gave our home a sense of normalcy. But nothing could prepare me for the moment everything fell apart. I had no idea that when I opened my laptop to check the bills, I would discover something that would shatter everything I believed about my family, about trust. The notification was simple. Your balance has fallen below the minimum threshold. At first I thought it was a glitch, a mistake. Our son's college fund, 6 years of saving, planning for his future, was untouchable, or so I thought. As I logged into the account, expecting to find some kind of technical error, I was met with the cold truth. The account was empty, not just a little low, but completely drained. $0, no transactions, no explanation. I tried to call Laura. My voice trembled as I dialed, but there was no answer, not once, not twice. And then I began to realize that the silence wasn't just in the air. It was a reflection of the lies and the distance that had been growing for weeks. I should have seen the signs, but the truth came crashing down like a freight train. My wife had taken everything we had, and she was gone. What happened next was something I never could have imagined. My 10-year-old son, Jason, walked into the room, completely unaware of the storm that had just torn through our lives. His smile was too calm, too knowing. "Dad, it's okay," he said. "I fixed everything." Those words, from a child too young to fully grasp the depth of betrayal, would lead us into a world that no one, not even I, was prepared for. What had Jason done? How had he fixed something I couldn't even begin to understand? This is not just a story about loss. It's about family, resilience, and the lengths one would go to protect what matters most. And in the quietest of moments, we learn that sometimes it's not the parents who protect their children, but the children who protect us. Before everything changed, there were moments, simple, everyday moments that now feel like pieces of a puzzle I wish I had put together sooner. I remember the smell of Laura's cooking in the kitchen, filling the house on quiet Sunday mornings. Jason would be running around, his energy endless, always asking questions about everything from dinosaurs to why the sky was blue. And I, sitting on the couch, would watch it all unfold with a sense of peace, thinking that nothing could ever break this. But that peace, as I would come to learn, was fragile, built on what felt like an unshakable foundation. I didn't realize then how many cracks were quietly forming under the surface. It wasn't long before those cracks began to show. It started small, an empty look in Laura's eyes when we talked, a silence that lingered longer than it should. Jason had noticed it too. He would ask why Mom seemed distracted, why she wasn't home as often, why she wasn't there to help with his school projects anymore. I'd brush it off, telling him that Mom was just tired, stressed from work, the usual excuses that never seemed to settle right in my stomach. Looking back, I see it all now. The way Laura would spend longer hours at the office, or sometimes come home with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. I could have asked more questions. I could have dug deeper. But I didn't. I trusted her. I believed that nothing could take away from what we had, this family we'd built together. The truth is, Laura and I hadn't been perfect. There were arguments, disagreements, moments of tension. We were two people trying to balance careers, parenting, and life's demands, and sometimes that balance teetered dangerously close to the edge. But like any marriage, we thought we could work through it. That was the idea anyway. It was during one of those mundane evenings when the weight of it all began to settle in that I first realized something was wrong. Jason had just finished his homework and was sitting beside me, talking about his day, his usual chatter filling the air. I wasn't really listening at first. too distracted by the bills piling up in front of me. But then the sudden absence of Laura hit me again. It wasn't just her physical absence anymore. It was the emptiness, the hollow feeling of something missing. I looked at the half-empty coffee cup on the counter, a silent reminder that she wasn't there beside me, that this was no longer the family I once knew. And then came that moment, the moment I never could have predicted, when the foundation I thought was rock solid cracked wide open. I checked our joint account, something I did routinely, expecting nothing more than the usual bill payments. But when I saw the balance, when I saw that it was empty, I froze. I still couldn't understand it. The funds were meant for Jason's future, for his college tuition. Laura and I had both agreed that it would be untouched, that we would sacrifice, save, and plan for his education. The very thought of losing that money, the trust behind it, seemed impossible. But there it was, empty. The number burned into my mind, and everything I thought I knew about our life, about Laura, began to shift. I thought back to the weeks leading up to this moment, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the vague answers to my questions. But how had I missed it? How had I missed her withdrawing everything and taking off without a word? She had been planning it for longer than I had realized, and I had been blind to the signs. And that's when it all hit me. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was deeper, more personal. Laura had chosen to walk away, to leave us behind, without so much as a conversation. It was as if everything we had built, everything we had worked for, meant nothing. And in that moment, as the reality of her disappearance set in, I couldn't help but wonder how I could have been so wrong about everything. I tried to call her, tried to get some answers, but the silence on the other end of the line made it clear. She was gone, not just physically, but emotionally too. And I was left standing there, trying to put together the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. Jason, of course, had no idea what was happening. He was just a kid, 10 years old, still innocent and full of hope. I remember looking at him that evening as he sat next to me, his eyes wide with curiosity, asking why I looked so sad. How could I explain to him that everything he knew was about to change? "Where's Mom?" he had asked, his voice soft but steady. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know how to explain that the woman he trusted, the woman who had promised to always be there, had stolen everything from him. And yet, as he looked up at me, something in his expression told me that he already knew more than I was ready to admit. His smile was too calm, too knowing. "Dad," he said softly, "it's okay. I fixed it." How could a 10-year-old possibly fix something so broken? The days that followed Laura's disappearance felt like a fog that refused to lift. I went through the motions, pretending that everything was fine for Jason's sake. I'd go to work, make breakfast, help him with his homework, but inside, I was unraveling. Every time I looked at Jason, I saw a little version of me, a reflection of everything I had tried so hard to protect. And yet now I was standing on the edge of a life I didn't recognize, a life I was terrified of losing. I still couldn't make sense of it all. How had she done this? Laura, the woman I'd married, the mother of our son. How could she betray us like this? The thought of it consumed me, gnawing at my every moment. I kept replaying the signs I should have noticed, the way she had started dressing up for errands that never quite added up, the long hours at work that kept her away from home, the whispers, the phone calls, the sudden secretive behavior. It was all there, right in front of me, and I had missed it. One evening, after another long day of pretending, I found myself in the living room staring at the empty space where Laura's things used to be. Her suitcase was gone. It was like she had erased herself from the home we had built. The familiar smell of her perfume was gone from the bedroom. The house felt colder, emptier. Even Jason seemed quieter, as though he could feel the weight of the change that I couldn't explain. But what struck me the most was the way Jason handled it. He wasn't crying. He wasn't asking where she had gone. He wasn't even angry. He was, as always, calm. Too calm. As the days passed, I began to realize that my son wasn't reacting like a 10-year-old should. A child should have been confused, hurt, upset. But Jason? He seemed oddly composed. There was something about the way he held himself, the way he spoke, that felt too mature for his age. One night, after I had put him to bed, I decided to search through the house for any sign of Laura, anything that might help me understand where she had gone, why she had left. That's when I found it, the tablet. Jason's tablet. He'd always been into technology, coding, gaming, and building little projects. It was nothing new for him to be absorbed in his tablet for hours on end. But tonight, something felt different. I approached his room quietly, peering through the door. The dim light from the screen illuminated his face, which was etched in concentration, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Jason," I called softly, stepping into the room. He froze, glancing at me with that same calm expression. His eyes were wide, but his smile was controlled. Too controlled. "Dad, what's up?" he asked casually, as if he wasn't hiding something. I felt a pang of unease. "What are you working on?" "Oh, just a school project," he said quickly, minimizing the screen. But there was something in the way he did it, something that made my stomach tighten. I knew my son. He wasn't just building something for school. His project was more than that. But what could it be? I didn't press him then. I let it go, hoping that I was overthinking things. But the next day, as I was making breakfast, I caught him again, this time on the phone. He was whispering, and when he saw me walk in, he quickly shoved the phone into his pocket. His eyes flicked toward me, but he didn't say anything. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, nobody," Jason said, with a quick shrug. He smiled a little too brightly and walked away. But it didn't sit right with me. Why was he being so secretive? Why was he acting so grown up? What was going on in that little head of his? It wasn't until later that week that things began to take a turn I never could have predicted. I was in the garage, trying to clear my head, when I heard the familiar sound of Jason's footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting to see him standing there with his usual carefree expression. But this time, there was something different in his eyes, something sharp, calculating. "Dad, I'm working on something," he said, his voice steady. He was standing next to a whiteboard, which I hadn't noticed before. It was covered with diagrams, equations, and flowcharts. It looked like something out of a spy movie, not something a 10-year-old should be working on. I took a step forward, my heart racing. "Jason, what is this?" "Just a project," he said quickly, covering the whiteboard with his small frame. He smiled nervously, his hands trembling just slightly as he wiped the sweat off his brow. "School project, Dad, really." But it wasn't a school project. I could feel it in my bones, the way he looked at me, the way he spoke. It was like he was hiding something big. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized that Jason knew more than he was letting on. He was working on something that wasn't just about a stolen college fund. It was about something far bigger. I watched him as he grabbed his tablet again, the same look of determination in his eyes. What was going on? What was he planning? "Jason," I said quietly, my voice shaking, "what are you doing?" "I'm fixing it, Dad," he said, his voice calm and sure. "You'll see. I've got it under control." In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. My mind was a constant blur of anger, confusion, and a kind of hopelessness I had never known. Jason, however, was a different story. He seemed almost unaffected by everything that had happened, as if he had already accepted the chaos and found a way to deal with it. At first I thought it was just shock, that he was too young to process what was going on. But the more I watched him, the more I realized that Jason wasn't just coping. He was working on something big. One evening, as I sat alone in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, I heard the familiar sound of Jason tapping away at his tablet in the living room. It was late, later than usual for him to be up. But there he was, hunched over the screen, eyes focused with an intensity that seemed far beyond his years. He didn't even glance up when I walked by, absorbed completely in whatever he was doing. "Jason," I called, trying to keep my voice casual, though I was growing more and more uneasy. "What are you working on now?" He looked up for a moment, his face unreadable. "Just homework, Dad," he replied. But there was something in his voice, something that didn't quite fit. He said it so nonchalantly, but I could hear the edge of something more beneath his words. I didn't push him further that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why was he acting like this? Why was my 10-year-old son taking on the burden of everything? The next day, Jason didn't go to school. It wasn't that he was sick, or that anything seemed wrong. He simply told me that he had things to do. "I've got a lot of work to finish, Dad," he said, and I didn't question it. I assumed he was just feeling the stress of everything. But that afternoon, as I walked by the garage, I saw him inside, surrounded by tools and wires, his small hands moving with a precision that stunned me. I watched for a moment, my heart pounding, as he soldered something together. What was he building now? What had been so important that he had spent days hiding it from me? Before I could speak, he looked up and smiled, the same calm, controlled smile that had been a constant lately. "Dad, you're not going to believe this, but I think I'm close to finishing." I swallowed hard, trying to process what was happening. "Jason, what is this? What are you doing?" "It's the plan," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I'm fixing it, like I said." And then it hit me. My son wasn't just talking about the money. He wasn't just trying to make sense of what Laura had done. He was playing a role I never could have imagined for him. He was fixing everything, all on his own, in a way I couldn't even comprehend. "Jason, you need to tell me what's going on," I said, my voice unsteady. "You don't have to handle this alone. You don't need to fix everything. I'm here for you." Jason paused for a moment, his hands still, but his expression never changed. "It's not about fixing things for me, Dad," he said softly. "It's about fixing things for us. You don't have to do it all. I've got this." The words hit me like a brick. I didn't know whether to feel proud of his resourcefulness or terrified of the direction he was headed in. Jason was taking matters into his own hands, taking control in a way that no child his age should have to. He had already lost so much, and now he was trying to fix everything, by any means necessary, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what that meant. The next few days blurred together. I tried to keep a sense of normalcy for Jason, tried to act like things were okay. But every moment I spent with him, I felt this growing sense of dread, like we were walking down a path we couldn't turn back from. Jason's behavior became even more secretive. He stopped leaving his tablet unattended. He locked the garage when he was in there, and he even started covering up his whiteboard whenever I walked by. But then one afternoon, everything changed. Jason came into the kitchen, his face serious. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something," he said. His tone was calm, but there was something in his eyes that made my stomach tighten. "Okay," I said, setting my coffee cup down. "What's going on?" "I've done everything," he said, his voice steady. "It's done. I've got the money back." "What?" I said, my voice almost a whisper. "What are you talking about?" Jason took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving mine. "The college fund, the money Mom took. I've transferred it back to where it belongs. It's safe now." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Jason, how? How did you do this?" He just shrugged. "It was easy. I knew the passwords. I knew what to do. It's all back in the account." I felt my knees weaken, and I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Jason, that's illegal. You can't just hack into people's accounts. You could get in serious trouble." Jason didn't flinch. "You didn't do anything, Dad. She took everything. I had to do something. I couldn't just let her get away with it." His words hit me harder than anything else. My son, my 10-year-old boy, had just taken control of a situation I couldn't even begin to handle. He had done something illegal, something dangerous, to fix the mess Laura had made, and he did it without a second thought. It wasn't just the money. It was about power, about control, and about revenge. And that's when I realized the path we were on, the way Jason was handling this, was leading us somewhere I didn't know how to navigate. He had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. "What else did you do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason looked at me, his face still calm, but something in his eyes shifted, something colder, darker. "I took care of everything, Dad. Don't worry, it's all over now." I didn't know what to say. My son had fixed the problem, but at what cost? What had he become in the process? The days after Jason's revelation felt like I was living in a dream, one that I couldn't wake up from. Every action, every decision I made was now under a new, glaring light. What kind of father was I? How had I let my son, my 10-year-old boy, carry such a heavy weight? And worse, what kind of family had I allowed to fall apart so completely? I spent nights questioning myself. As a father, I thought I had done my best. I thought I had protected Jason from the harsh realities of life. I had tried to shield him from the pain of seeing his mother walk out on us, to make sure he still felt safe and loved, even in the midst of all the chaos. But I had failed him. I had let my own grief, my own anger, cloud my judgment and my ability to truly see what he needed. Jason had been right there, silently carrying the burden, trying to fix everything. He hadn't asked for this, but he had stepped up when I couldn't. One night I sat in the living room, staring at the cold, empty space where Laura's things had been. The house felt quieter now, more isolated. Jason was in his room, working on another project, and for the first time, I allowed myself to reflect on everything. The realization hit me like a wave. Jason had always been there, right in front of me, trying to show me the way forward. But in my anger and pain, I had overlooked him. I had let the situation overwhelm me, allowing it to consume me, when all Jason had wanted was for us to be a family again. The love, the connection, had always been there. But I had forgotten how important it was to protect that bond, to nurture it through the struggles. It was then that I realized that family, real family, doesn't just survive the storm. It grows stronger because of it. Jason had faced something no child should ever have to face. He had seen the cracks in our family and decided without hesitation to rebuild them. I had thought I was the one holding everything together, but it was him, my 10-year-old son, who had stepped up when no one else could. I walked into his room that night, my heart heavy with regret. I found him sitting on the floor, his tablet in his lap, but for the first time in days he wasn't glued to it. He was just sitting there quietly, as if waiting for me to come to him. "Jason," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I'm sorry." He didn't respond at first, just looked up at me with that same calm, knowing expression. And then slowly, he set the tablet down and walked over to me. "I'm sorry too, Dad," he said. His words were simple, but they hit me harder than any apology I could have imagined. "I didn't want to make things harder for you. I just wanted to fix it." I realized then that I had been trying to fix everything the wrong way. I'd been so focused on the anger, on the betrayal, on the loss that I had forgotten the one thing that mattered most: family. Jason wasn't just trying to fix the money or get back at Laura. He was trying to protect us. He was trying to save the one thing we couldn't afford to lose: the bond we had as a family. As we sat together that night, I understood. Life wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about making everything right. It was about showing up, even when it was hard, even when it felt impossible. It was about being there for each other, holding on to what truly mattered, and finding the strength to move forward together. Jason had shown me what true strength looked like. Not the strength to fix things or make them right, but the strength to love, to protect, and to rebuild. And as a father, it was my turn to protect him, to show him that no matter what happened, no matter how broken things seemed, we would always have each other. We could rebuild together. That night, as I sat with Jason, I realized something else, too. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, trust, and loyalty. It's about showing up for each other when the world seems like it's falling apart. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest lesson I could teach Jason wasn't how to solve problems, but how to hold on to the people who matter most. We may not have everything figured out, and we may never fully heal from the betrayal we faced. But one thing was clear. We were still a family, and as long as we had that, we had everything we needed to move forward, together. The days that followed were quieter, calmer, but in a way that felt like the eye of the storm, peaceful, but with a lingering sense that the world could change again in an instant. Jason and I spent more time together, not just in the quiet moments of everyday life, but in the understanding that we had been through something that would forever shape us. The truth was, we hadn't just survived the storm. We had learned to rebuild, to come out stronger on the other side, together. It wasn't easy. It never would be. But every time I looked at Jason, I saw something different now. A boy who had grown up far faster than he should have, but also a child who had carried his family through a crisis with more strength and wisdom than most adults. He had shown me that sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight outside. They're the ones we fight within ourselves, against our fears, our doubts, and our broken hearts. And Jason had fought, not with anger, but with quiet resolve. The sun had set that evening, casting a soft golden light over the house. Jason was sitting at the kitchen table, his homework in front of him, but his eyes were distant. I sat across from him, unsure of what to say, unsure of what was left to say after everything we'd been through. "Dad," he said suddenly, breaking the silence, "I'm glad we're still a family, even after everything." His words hung in the air between us, simple but profound. In that moment, I realized that he wasn't just talking about me and him. He was talking about the whole picture, the pieces that had once seemed broken, scattered and lost, now coming back together. I smiled at him, my heart full. "Yeah," I said quietly, "we're still a family, and we always will be." The world outside continued to turn, life slowly returning to normal, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace, real peace. Not the kind that comes from fixing everything, but the kind that comes from knowing you're not alone. That no matter what happens, the people you love will always be there. As I looked at Jason one last time that night, I realized how far we'd come. It wasn't just about the money or the betrayal. It was about understanding what truly matters: family, trust, love. The rest was just noise, and as I sat there, with my son beside me, I knew the hardest part was over. Not because we had solved everything, but because we had learned something more valuable than anything else: how to be whole again, together. The house was still, the world outside moving on, but inside, I felt something change. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. We would face it together. So I leave you with this. In the chaos of life, where everything seems to fall apart, what do you hold on to? Is it the pain, the betrayal, or the love that remains, the family that still stands strong? Sometimes the hardest thing isn't finding your way through the storm. It's deciding what to do with the calm when it finally comes. And I wonder, how would you rebuild the pieces of your own story?